66 Quaifes Road, and item number 11 on the agenda. And I think we have staff to present. So we have a recommendation from the community board, which is different from the staff recommendation. So I'm very keen for the staff recommendation to be worked through. So can I hand it over to you guys to make a quick overarching comment, and then I'll open it up for questions.
So this has been a process where we bought some land. We needed to buy a whole property to meet our needs, and only half of it was used for those specific stormwater needs. And this is the surplus land that we bought that we're trying to now dispose. It's been through a long process with the board, explored through 2 workshops and several reports to get to this point. We, from an officer's point of view, after looking at all of the forward plans, all of the policies, all of the needs, the current provision, would say, hey, we don't need to retain any of this. The board has taken a different view. It'll be up to councillors to consider those matters today, and we're happy to answer questions.
So why did you buy more than you needed?
Because to buy it, the vendor would only sell the whole property.
So, sorry. So
The vendor would only sell the whole property. That's common with a lot of our purchases.
Right.
The vendor will want to get out completely of the property, and we have to buy it, and then we work to dispose of the excess land.
And tell me what the policy is now, because we've changed that policy, so we wouldn't be considering this as I understand it under the new policy. So can you just walk us through the policy carefully so that everyone understands what the policy would be now?
Yep. So you've delegated the decision to sell the surplus land acquired for a project to staff. What we would still do in those cases is still work through those 5 criteria that you've given us to see whether we need to hold land. And we follow those, and those include, is there an identified use? Are there alternative uses? So we go through those processes. But now staff can make that decision to sell and then return the purchase price back into the project from which it came.
Okay, now obviously you've talked to Kāinga Ora. What is their view of the community board's recommendation?
So an earlier recommendation from the board was that they would like to see some potential for affordable housing on the site. So we circulated it to a couple of affordable and social housing providers. There was certainly interest. We've spoken to Kāinga Ora. They're interested in the whole site, and as was mentioned earlier, and as I mentioned to the board when we presented this, they'd be happy with 2/3 of it as well. They would be looking at it for building a community on it, so it would be a mixture of affordable and social housing. They are not proceeding very much on this at the moment until council makes their decision whether or not to dispose. They're not getting too excited because of that.
And you've identified in here that there would be an obligation to include a neighbourhood park in the context of a subdivision of this nature, and that this land represents 3 times that amount of land, as I read the paper.
So the amount that is in the district plan and the southwest area plan is that they're looking for around 3,000 square metres of parkland in that general vicinity, and that would come through on subdivision and through development contributions. Retaining it for that purpose is a bit of a double-edged sword because it hasn't been designed yet. We don't know where the best place would be, how it would work with the community. It's better to get that given back at a later stage where it's in the right place for the community and for the developments that will occur around it as well.
Right. Sam?
Oh yeah, just one question, and probably to signal I'm happy to move the staff recommendation at the appropriate time. It was just around the loss of revenue from this. So how's that? What I couldn't see was, I guess, the opportunity cost of not selling the whole lot. Yeah. Could you just talk us through that?
So the estimated value is just over 3 million for sale.
Well, for the sale of the surplus is around 3
million. So if we retained a third of that, there would be about 1.08 million that we wouldn't realise, accepting that we've still got to do negotiations on price.
So, and probably the only other thing would be just around the ongoing costs associated with that block of land. So we do pay rates to ourselves, and we'd obviously have to maintain it. So can we quantify what that would be?
We haven't necessarily quantified it for this exercise, but we would have those holding costs associated with maintenance and rates. Okay. Absolutely.
And just the only other one,
and any development costs as well, if we were then to develop at a later stage.
And probably just the other one is, do we know the quantum, and it may be too early to tell, around the development contributions that the city may benefit from the sale of this entire piece of surplus land?
Don't think we've specifically estimated that, no.
We don't know yet. Okay, cool. Thank you.
So Sam's indicated that he'd like to move the staff recommendation.
Yeah, not the community or the staff one.
Yeah, the staff recommendation.
Yes.
Is there a seconder for that? Tim Scandrett? Okay, well, we've got a motion on the floor, so I'll continue with questions though. I've got Jimmy and then Mike and
two questions. First one, you mentioned that it's an area, new subdivision area, and hasn't been designed yet. But my concern is if we sort out this piece of land, but in the future we thought, that's high density residential area, we need a piece of land to be can develop playground or reserve or park, etc. In that time, how come we can, to meet the community or meet the people's needs?
Yeah. So you can certainly consider it. The board's aware that from one of the workshops, there's 77 parks within a 2K radius of the site. There's a lot of sports ones, and therefore sports parks. There is 30 hectares of sports park planned for development in the Templeton area to help serve the southwest area. So there's a lot of land there already. Over 15% of Horswell is in open space. So there's a lot of land in Horswell already. But we're still through that development for that increased density. Our plans allow for developers to contribute land and or money to develop new parks in local areas. And that would still occur because if as per the staff recommendation, Kayangara get it, they pay DCs and they can contribute to it. So there's certainly those mechanisms that allow for us to get those local parks if needed, but there is a lot of parks in the vicinity there.
Okay. Second question is regarding to you mentioned it's not meet the criteria of the policy. I mean, this one is mitigatable or not? Mitigate can be the mitigate.
To mitigate, sorry, to
because
mitigate.
Because the moment inconsistent with the policy you mentioned.
Yeah. So the criteria that your criteria that you gave us was to look at it not just now, and not just for the use that a piece of land is at the moment, but what it could be. But it also then tries to, the criteria you've given us, try to balance that with good, prudent financial management. So if there's not a identified use that can be reasonably achieved within a period, we then say, well, we don't need that land. Another test you might consider is, if we didn't own this, would we buy it? And I suspect you'll find the answer in this case would be no, we wouldn't buy it.
Okay, thank you.
Mike?
Thank you. Just looking at where the land is, future development could potentially include a pedestrian access out to Horswell Junction Road?
No, I think there's private properties that abut it, so there couldn't be access out there without acquiring more property rights.
So they could be acquired, but it's not there at the moment.
No.
But there's potential though to create an access point.
Well, theoretically, but it would probably require purchasing another property that's fronting Horswell Junction Road.
And we probably don't know this. Do you know what the reduction, I guess, would be in the number of social and affordable housing if actually we retained a third of the land?
Kaingora hasn't done full master planning of it, so there's not a definitive number. We've talked broadly around 30 to 40 in discussions I've had, so you'd reduce that by 10 to 15 houses.
The zoning requires 15 lots a hectare, so broadly 15 based on that.
Okay, thank you.
Aaron?
Yeah, two questions. One is around your recommendation to not set that land aside for the park space, because as you say, it'll be picked up in the planning for the master plan for the area. Our parks master plan for the whole city would have been considered in your report, correct?
Yes.
Which identifies where parks are needed now and in the future.
That's the open space strategy, yes. Yep.
Okay, so that's pretty clear. And then the other one is...
And the advice we're giving, well, it's coming through my voice, is from our parks planners and their advice.
Okay, and the other one with selling to Kaingaora is, what does that subdivision look like? Do we have a model of what they're currently building? Because we've got some pockets in the city where we have high density of social housing and we have issues around that. So are we creating another one of those if we do that?
I don't believe so. Kaingaora has a mandate, they have a mandate to build communities, and it's not just provide social housing. They've taken over some of the functions of the old Kiwi Build unit, and they're looking at affordable houses as well. So, certainly from my discussions, it would be a mix of tenures, both public housing and affordable housing in there. I don't believe that you'd see a pocket of major deprivation from these, and certainly my understanding that their current model is to work with communities to try and avoid that. And I think from what I've heard from Councillor Galloway, she's had discussions with them, and they are keen to do that joint working together to develop communities.
So then, what's their ratio?
I don't know, and they haven't, as I said before, they haven't done the master planning for the site yet. They're not spending time and effort on this until there's a clear decision from council that we're going to dispose of.
It will have a underlying zoning though, which is so many households.
15 lots of hectares that
15.
underlying,
Yeah.
It's not that. In most modern subdivisions, like even the developers will only allow so many houses to be sold as rentals because of the behaviours that go with properties. So there's papers on it through universities, all sorts of stuff, how you get good social outcome through development.
The ratio is between
rental versus ownership.
Social and affordable.
One thing I can say is from the discussions, it's been 2-3 plus bedrooms, and I suspect you'll find that there's less social problems with those larger ones than 1 or 2 bedroom ones. That's certainly our experience.
Anne?
I'd just like to foreshadow, if I may, that if the staff recommendation doesn't pass, then I will be supporting the community.
I assume that you would be.
Right,
yeah.
great, thank you. Can I, and I have a question. I have a question. Bruce, is there any opportunity, given the kind of partnership stuff that we've been doing a lot of, and the conversation through the LTP was a lot about partnership with community, is there an opportunity for a piece of land like this to be kind of in community, sort of to work with council and community together to maintain and to use it and to that sort of thing, rather than it all on to council in terms of maintenance and use?
It's an approach that you're starting to see, and you've got a good example down the road at the Old Hallsville Library. We're actually working on something which we'll bring to you shortly around community asset transfer model that sets some guidelines and policy direction for doing exactly that, increasing the work of partnership. So absolutely there is that opportunity if you chose to do that for this. And I think you'll see that as a model that we can apply more broadly in other areas as well.
I had Jake and Phil and Pauline.
So just looking at the open spaces available in Hallsville, what percentage do you know roughly are drains, essentially?
Exactly. So 69% of council's properties in Hallsville are parks. 25% come into that land drainage, but they're multi-use. I know that I've heard some say that they're not able to be used for recreation. When I see the dog walkers and walkers around them, I'm sure that they're doing something other than recreation. And then the remainder is a mixture of housing, facilities, and other Three Waters land.
And in the time we've owned that land, forgive me, how long have we owned it for? And do you have an idea of what the land value has gone up by in the time we've owned it?
I think we've owned it for about a year and a half. We bought it for about 50 a square metre. It's probably worth, I wouldn't like to speculate too much because it's potentially commercially sensitive going forwards, but it has increased in value.
So retaining a third of it would obviously carry the same positive benefit.
Not if you never sell it.
No, I'm just pointing out a fact.
So, sorry, who was next? Phil? Was it Phil?
Yeah, just a real quick one. When you bought the land for your stormwater retention basin, you would have factored in that you not needed to, but really wanted to sell the surplus to help fund your development of your pond.
My understanding,
Well, it was technically unbudgeted.
Yeah.
The budget only allocated the amount for the land for the pond and construction of the pond. We were forced to buy more. In fact, we bought 2 properties, both we bought more of. We had approval and we've sold off the adjacent, the next door property. So this is really closing out the process.
But you always had in your mind the day
Definitely, it was surplus. We knew it wasn't required for the project. The original land purchase was for a stormwater project, so the intent was always to sell, well, from staff's perspective.
Pauline.
Thank you. So, if the purchaser would be required to retain 3,000 square metres for a reserve in any development, correct?
would certainly to contribute towards achieving that. Because it could be that with there's 2 sites on it next to it, one on each side. They're still going through subdivision, I believe. Yeah. So the actual location of the 3,000 metres can be anywhere within those 4 or 3 lots of properties.
So,
but they need to contribute to that.
So my question is that if that was retained as reserve and in the future someone wanted to build a community centre on that, would that be an obstacle? Would it have to go through the Reserves Act and get changed? Or is there any way that that could be... To me, that's one question.
Yeah. So one, I don't believe, will depend on the status that the land is comes to us in terms of the Reserves Act. But I'd be looking more closely at things like your community facilities plan, which, as far as I can tell, and John might be able to confirm, is there's not that need for a facility in that area.
No, that's okay. That's another issue.
But also, if you did want to have a community facility and that need came through, it might be better placed next to the activity centre at Longhurst, where we have additional land that's not being used, where you've got good public transport links, you've got the access between the community centre and the medical centre and the pharmacy. You create more of a community there.
Yeah. So my question still stands that if this 3,000 square metres would be retained and any development be required to retain that, it could be feasible to put a centre on that in the future. And
it could be, yes.
Do you know off your head how the size of the St Albans Community Centre land is?
No, not
nowhere near 3,000, is it?
Not off the top of my head, no, sorry.
What I'm saying is that 3,000 square metres is a big chunk of...
Yeah.
That's identified in the ODP as a neighbourhood park, and you either have a DC contribution or when it's developed, the planners here will dictate or assist in where that park goes, and under the DC policy, they could vest 3,000 square metres of land to fulfil that requirement. So the intent would be, under normal processes, sell the whole block, then the developer submits a subdivision plan, we work through the planning process and we say that's a good place for the park, and then they vest it back in council as part of the subdivision.
So is there any way that just that if that vesting process did happen, then that could be classified as a zoning in such a way that something could be built on it?
Well, in theory, you could change the classification in future if
Yeah, I know,
there's
but
an
it's
identified need, if that the
Okay.
network plan identified that.
Yeah.
All right, so I'll open it up for debate, but I wouldn't mind. Do you want to close it off, or? Yeah. So I don't normally speak against a recommendation that's come from a community board, especially one that's obviously been so deeply considered. But we changed the policy for a reason. We changed the policy to stop this from happening. When we buy land and we have to buy more than we need for particular purposes, we have to put that money back, the excess, back into the funding of the project. So this was designed before this came up before the policy was changed. But if this had occurred right at the very outset of that new policy, we wouldn't be having this debate. All of the conversations with the community board would have taken place, but in the context of working out what the best outcome is. And the best outcome for this is the mix of affordable and community housing. And I just think that in terms of all of the issues that are confronting our city at the moment, I think this is a really bad step to hold on to a piece of land that we don't necessarily need, and which can be catered for in the context of the development of the site. We know that Kāinga Ora wishes to work with us on it, and so it's a good result. This is actually a win-win for the community, at the same time as addressing broader needs. This wouldn't be here if the new policy had been in place, and for good reason, I think. And look, I understand why community board members who are councillors are going to have to, be true to the view that they've already expressed. But when we sit around this table, we sit here with the best interests of the city at heart. And I would just ask that we think carefully about how this property came into our hands. We had to buy more in order to get the land that we needed. We should dispose of the balance. Tim.
Yeah, look, just two quick things. Firstly, you always got to remember why the land was bought. It's really clear why it was bought. It was bought for a process and a project, and selling the excess of it will soften the blow to our budgets. And we've just been through a long-term plan, which is, close to 5% of increase. So how are we going to try and manage our budgets if we're going to do this kind of thing off a whim is ridiculous. Second of all, town planning. When you're going to get into like Hallsville with a huge development, it is absolutely crucial to have really good planning of infrastructure with regards to recreation. And our staff, it's right through the report from the staff, and it's been reiterated here, there are plans and visions for Hallsville, and this is totally against any kind of good planning whatsoever. So I think it's, thank you to the staff for the information that's been given, and I'll be supporting, as I said, I've seconded Sam's supporting this.
Anne.
So this is an opportunity. Yes, we don't need this land now, but Hallsville is going to grow to 45,000 by 2030, and we are going to need it then. So here is an opportunity for us to safeguard some space that will be used for sports fields. At the moment, we have sports fields that are oversubscribed and in demand. So we are going to need this land going forward. Templeton is a long way away. We're about sustainability. We're about caring for the environment. We don't want people to have to get in cars and go into Templeton. We want them to be able to play sport in their local area. That's only one reason. Hallsville has a long history of residents fighting for land. We had our residents association fighting for Hallsville Quarry to be retained as a recreational reserve for the people of Christchurch. And now look at it, it's an amazing treasure and jewel in the crown of Christchurch. We've also had a residents association fighting for extra land to be given for Hallsville Domain. So this is a community who has been able to have some future vision. It's also a community who live daily with the pressures of a place where population is exploding and there is pressure on resource. So we have an opportunity now to think about the future, to be able to put land aside. We've heard that we can work with community to maintain this, to look after it. It doesn't have to come back on council. And we have opportunities to work with Kāinga Ora to develop a community, not just build homes, but develop a community. And we have, alongside it, for those families, a future place to play their football, to play their rugby, and to have that space put aside for future use. So I really ask that you consider that this is an opportunity. Yes, it was never meant to be kept. It was always going to be sold. But here we have this opportunity to hang on to this piece of land for our future generations. So I would ask you to really consider carefully the Community Board's recommendations.
Jake and then Jimmy.
I think I've left my microphone on, which is convenient, meant to save me a button press. I really concur with the eloquent comments of my colleague, much more so than my own. I think I've been swayed really by. It's not often we hear a community say, "Hey, look, we welcome development and we welcome particularly social housing development," and all they've said back to us is, "Look, we just want it with a little bit of safeguarding. We just want it with to protect green space in an area that is experiencing explosive growth." And I think that if one day we could deliver a fantastic community asset right next to social housing, that would actually be the best outcome for the city.
Jimmy? Oh, sorry, Mike. I apologise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the best outcome, should be not subject to the point of view. We should humble, more listen to the resident, listen to the community. We sold at least a piece of land. We comply with the policy. Then we can, to make the outcome is social housing, affordable housing, and finance the benefit. However, we reserve all the 1/3 of piece of land. Probably all the least best outcome is more wide range, not only the social housing, because still the 2/3 piece of land can build up social the affordable housing and also finance. We still have the income feedback, but at least those green space, those park reserve, there's the community particular concern. If not like that, why the Hallsville community, particularly in the community board meeting, they have made this deputation for 2 times, and the individual also make this deputation. And today, their community board, and also the community board member Andre, have a petition for 340 signature. There's a best outcome. That's their view. As a elect member, as council, we should consider their concern. If they have no less concern, they totally will be agree with the staff office recommendation. They have this concern because the Hallsville area, southwest area, they're short of this green space, designated for the park, for the reserve, for the kind of the green, even the community facility, etc. So this is my particular concern. We always mention, we would like to build up the resilient community, resilient city. But the conditions, whether we are humble, to careful, to listen to their voices. This is my view.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you. Look, well, Jimmy's right. We should be listening to our residents, but also we should also be listening to the facts that are presented to us by staff. And it's quite clear that actually in this area there's actually no issue with the supply of green space moving forward. And also where this development is going, it's actually going to be very close to the Hallsville Community Centre, library and pool. Council should not be land banking residential land in a housing crisis, especially when that development will create affordable and community housing.
Sam, do you want to close off the debate?
Oh, Leanne,
Oh,
do you
sorry,
mind if I-
James. My apologies. I didn't see your hand.
No, it's all right. It's trickier on Zoom. Look, a lot of it's been said, but I just wanted to highlight that DC's pay for local infrastructure, so that potential population influx of development that will require local infrastructure has a mechanism which exists to deal with that. So the causer pays for the required infrastructure and the amenity when that time arises. What we don't need is the Christchurch ratepayer to pick up the tab to land bank something that we simply have no use for. If you support land banking it, even though there is a mechanism to cater to the population increase in the future, then I certainly don't ever want to hear anyone that supports that complain about someone that's land banked something in the central city for a time that may or may not arise. We've changed the policy so we don't do this foolish stuff in future. And I do want to raise one other point, and that is councillors and community board members take different oaths. I don't begrudge the community board for coming up with the recommendation they did, because they don't have to take the lens that city councillors do to look out for all of Christchurch. Hey, what's the harm in someone else picking up the tab to land bank something for a time in the future? But as a city councillor, our responsibility is to look out for all of Christchurch ratepayers. Our staff have said that there is not a need for this, there is not a use for this today, and there are 77 parks within a 2 kilometre radius of this site. So not 7, not 17, 77. Not selling the surplus property is absolute madness, and I certainly hope that the staff recommendation is supported, and I'll be voting in favour of selling surplus property.
Thank you. Sam, would you like to wind up?
Oh, yeah, sure. I'll only be brief. I've actually really enjoyed the debate, and it kind of brings out, I guess, in essence, why we're all here, because we have different views on an issue. But I do sympathise with you, Anne, in the respect that you've had to, stand up for your community, and I commend you for that. Look, I think, it's unfortunate that I think in some respects, I agree entirely with what Leanne said, in that this actually almost isn't a council decision in a way, because we've already rectified the problem that's sat there. We have a whole team that deal with this stuff on a daily basis. And this isn't an asset sale. This is disposal of land that was bought for a particular purpose that is no longer required. And so when you look at what the team have said, where it may cost $1 million, we may miss out on $1 million from its sale. I'm hoping it's a lot more than that, to be frank, in the current market. But you look at the additional costs that come with that, whether it's the ongoing maintenance or actually the rates we get or the development contributions, like James has said. This is an absolute no-brainer to move. It's not an asset sale. And I think, as Mike touched on quite well, we do have a housing crisis across the country, and it would be incredibly disappointing if I think it's the Minister of Housing's electorate, we were to make a decision like this that again would incite more housing that wasn't built for people that need it. So I would hope that everyone around this table doesn't block vote on ideology on an asset sale. It's not asset sales. This is a disposal of land that is no longer required, and I hope that common sense and financial prudence would win the day. So I'll certainly be supporting, and I hope others do the staff recommendation, which obviously I've moved and Tim seconded.
Thank you. So I'll put that motion. All those in favour say aye. Those opposed say no. Hard to tell. So I think we'll have a division. Thank you.
Sorry,
I'm sure the division sheet has been prepared.
Can I just have my abstention recorded since I wasn't here for the full item?
Yes.
Thank you.
The Mayor?
Yes.
Councillor Turner?
No.
Councillor Chen?
No.
Councillor Chu? No. Councillor Coker? No. Councillor Cotter? Abstain. Councillor Daniels?
Yes.
Councillor Davidson? Aye. Councillor Galloway? No. Councillor Goff?
Yes.
Councillor Kieran?
Yes, but against too.
Councillor McDonald?
Yes.
Councillor Major?
Yes.
Councillor McClellan?
No.
Councillor Scandrett?
Yes.
Councillor Templeton? The vote is 9 votes for, 6 votes against and 2 abstentions.
Thank you, that's carried. Thank you very much, and thank you to staff for all of the work that you've put on. Thank you.